Pardon?
You were daylight saving.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's not 8:30 yet, so I appreciate
My Mickey Mouse watch says it's 8:30, Claire.
Your Mickey Mouse watch says it's 8:30. I'm not going to cry, I've just got a couple of things. Yeah. Good to go? Yes, good to go.
Right, good morning, everybody. How are we going this morning, all right? Looks like we're 4 to 2. It's interesting split around the table, but never mind. Thank you for being here so late in the season. Obviously, the most critical thing today was we had planned for the majority of the meeting to be focused on the annual report. As the paper has already picked up, that's not going to happen today, but we do need to have a short discussion about where we're at with that the annual report and our audit opinion, and we will do so in due course. But the equally very good and important items on the rest of the paper. So Claire, thank you to you and to your staff for preparing what is our first meeting. I think I'm right in saying I don't think I've been to any other audit and risk committee, risk and assurance meeting on this side of the tronium. Our first meeting. So welcome everybody. Tom, I think you're the newest one here. Welcome to it. I know Grant's also, we're going to accept an apology from him, but welcome to the meeting as well. It's great to have you here too. And everybody else, welcome back. It's good to have you here. I'd like to just move to the agenda, please. Clearly, I think everybody will be well aware that we live stream. In fact, it's remiss of me not to welcome those that may be watching by way of live stream as well. I presume, by the way, Malavika, we have no councillors live streaming them. No, okay, thank you. So look, apologies. Do we have apologies? Tom, you mentioned Grant is for the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Leslie, you're here with us for the first hour. Are there any other matters we need to note? Darren, you're my sergeant at arms in terms of timekeeping. You've told me I'm going to do this fast, but
no, you told me. I just cocked an eyebrow.
Okay, I'll move from the chair that we accept the apology. Second. Thanks, Darren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Is there any matter in front of us that we should note any interests in? No. Yes, Ross.
Chair, I should just note when we do come to the annual report that I have a staff member that has been subcontracted to ICC since late November to assist.
Yep. I take it you see no reason that you shouldn't take part in the conversation on the audit. I'd appreciate it if you could. So I'm comfortable with that. Ross raised that with me last night, and I said I was comfortable that the involvement of his firm in a part of the annual report wasn't going to bar you from participation in the meeting. G'day Ria, how are you?
Hi,
welcome.
you?
Sorry my Mickey Mouse watch said it was 8:30. Your watch is probably more likely to be correct than mine, so so well done. And welcome to the meeting. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
I haven't been informed of any public forum or persons wishing to speak. I do have a minor late item which I think went up on Diligent yesterday, which was Michael's response to the Audit New Zealand letter, and I presume everybody has a copy. I think actually, perhaps more by chance and design, we do have hard copies handy if people would like to put their hands on them. Okay, thank you very much. Evelyn, welcome as well. Thank you. No, that's fine. Well, I think I must be getting close to Christmas, Evelyn. I think we're all keen to keep a meeting going. Look, there are no changes to the agenda. I propose we go through it in the way that it's outlined, and at an appropriate stage we'll move. Oh, okay. Sorry, that we need. Oh, so I've gone ahead of myself. Sorry. So in terms of the minor late item, we need to resolve that we receive it.
I'm happy to move we receive it.
Thank you, Darren.
Seconded.
Thank you, Tom. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Sorry about that. I should have noted that as a motion. So there are no changes to the agenda. So let us deal then with the open items, please. So first up is the committee's own terms of reference, which is a hang of it, an important thing to deal with up front. I'm looking, oh, Michael. If I say Michael, I'm going to get the right person, aren't I? One way or the other. Although I was looking the wrong way. Welcome, Michael. Appreciate you being here and your work you've done so far.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair. Te mare all. As noted in the paper, it's important that at the start of each training and throughout the life of a committee that its terms of reference are reviewed to ensure that they are up to date and reflect the work of the committee. This is the terms of reference for this committee that is proposed. It is tweaked slightly to recognise the creation of the Finance and Projects Committee and its areas of oversight. But outside of that, I don't have too much more I need to say to that. I'm happy for any questions and will answer them as I can.
Thank you, Michael. It was an interesting read to refresh your memory about why we're here, so it's superb. Other questions or comments? Yes, Tom.
Question and comment, I suppose. I note that we receive a paper on the safety and wellbeing, and I'm assuming that this committee has an accountability for overseeing or for governing the work in that area. There's nothing in actually the terms of reference I can see that explicitly refers to that.
That would be correct. It would be considered as part of the overall risk management, but I think your point is well made and fair, and I would suggest that we add a specific mention in for health and safety.
Thank you, Tom. I agree. Yes, any other comments? Yes. Ross? Sorry, I'm trying to remember.
Doesn't state explicitly, but I'm sure in the terms of reference that we developed last time that we ensured in terms of good governance that the chairperson was independent.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know quite how the agenda came out, but Claire quite helpfully has given me the June 2021's, which actually starts with what is the committee membership, which I think was a missing part from at least the papers as they were published on Diligence. So I presume that will be repeated at the front of it.
Yes.
Which should pick up the fact, your point, Ross, is independent.
Yeah, so it's already listed in the governance statement.
Yep.
With the names of all the members of the committee. This comes from the governance statement and the delegations register.
Brilliant.
Fair comment.
Thank you. I'm just thinking in terms of a standalone terms of reference. I appreciate the relationship with the government statement, but I think I take on board Ross's point. Any other comments folk would like to make? Yes, Snobby.
Raise this last term about the volume of work that's coming through this committee. I think one of those meetings we had about 5 hours, and I just wonder whether somewhere along the line we need to reflect that. I mean, the word risk is a very subjective term, and I mean everything you do in council has some degree of risk, and it doesn't matter what you look at it, it's all got risk attached to it, and whether we need to have going forward some sort of appetite for setting benchmarks or understandings of what level of risk that we don't need to bring to this committee as opposed to bringing everything. It just seemed that we were doubling up everywhere, and one of the options that I'd thought about was whether the chairs of the other committees at the end of dealing with any particular issue could then say this has a degree of risk that needs to go to the Risk and Assurance Committee, as opposed to maybe no, it doesn't have that. I just think it would gatekeep out some of the stuff that we were getting. I mean, this became the longest meeting we had for, I mean, not just the 5-hour one, but it just seems to be the longest we have right through the program.
Appreciate that. And as I think I said to you, that might be the chair rather than necessarily the role of the committee. So I'd take the advice on that. Look, Nobby, it was useful to go, as I said, to go back through this. Might I say, Michael, even to consider 2E, which is what we should be discussing with the external auditor after the audit. I didn't know whether, in fact, we should be so prescriptive because I'm not certain that that actually happens. But I think more seriously, Nobby, I'd be very happy to come back to you or come back to the committee for the next meeting.
Yep.
Actually, with trying to address that issue.
Yep.
because one of the things that through the last triennium, in a sense, we haven't fully addressed is actually item 4, which is risk management. And so that's really starting risk from the process of the top down, not the bottom up.
Yep.
And I think if we were to look at that process, we would better manage the risk of overlap. There will always be some form of overlap, but the risk of overlap between the role of this committee and indeed what you do in your committees elsewhere. Because I agree, we don't want to overlap.
I would just say on that, Mr. Chair, there I am aware that there is a risk work stream coming through
Yes.
to this committee.
Good.
It will be in the early new year,
Sweet.
led by Deloitte. So that will be coming. So hopefully,
right.
and if necessary, you know, again, the terms of reference should always be considered living, and we can refine that risk,
Yeah.
paragraph 4 from there.
Well, look, in that case, I mean, I probably should have been aware of that, Michael. But let's build off the back of that piece of work exactly being better in terms of the role. I think Nobby, in fairness, this committee, partly through my personal role as governance advisor to council through the whole saga of the last triennium, meant that this meeting got expanded, and we need to, I agree, have this as an efficient and direct risk and assurance committee rather than necessarily wandering all over the place, which we probably needed to last time. Yep.
So just as a reflection of that, I mean, I guess what I was suggesting is that the gatekeeper should not be the staff that present the reports, because it's my understanding, and it's not peculiar just to this council, but to other organisations as well. If in doubt, you put it past the risk and assurance that makes you safe. Where I think with the chairs that we've got, that's where the gatekeeping could possibly occur, where they discuss at the meeting. I think this needs to go forward to the risk and assurance. It has some degree of risk that's above our appetite or below the appetite, whichever way you want to look at it, as opposed to expecting staff. Because when you look at the reports that we get from staff, they've got a risk criteria in them, and just about every one of them's got some degree of risk in it. Very few that we get that don't have. So does that in turn trigger the fact that it needs to come here, or is it just alerting the other committees that there's some degree of risk? So
No, thank you for that.
Something for a discussion point going forward.
Yeah, and I think I want to come back to it because it's been raised by you've been diligent in raising it, Nobby, and I think we'll latch on to the work that Deloitte are doing, Michael, and we'll just make certain that we have got ourselves trimmed in the right way, which would be good. Yeah, Michael.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. Just want to remind Council the next item on the report is actually working through the work plan, which has got all the reports that are planned to come up to risk and assurance. They are very much at the higher level in relation to the reporting going forward. In the past, we've had them at the lower level while we establish what the organisational risk appetite is from a council perspective. The next phase, which Michael alluded to, was around what is the actual risk that council or this committee want us to focus on. So it will be directive from the committee, and council staff will obviously be working through with what council has recommended leading through that, and then it will be for the committee to finalise what they want to come forward, and that'll be the content within those reports. So we're not expecting a large number of additional reports, but I'll talk to that in the next item.
Thank you. Just a couple of other comments from me, which are more just, I think, work-ons, and I can sense the need for us just to put a bit more rigour is the wrong word, but some rethinking through it based on Nobby's point. I was interested in how we monitor 3B. Again, Ross and I were having a quiet chat about financial risk, and actually how do we do that? And I realise that also relates back to Nobby's point, that actually we were getting papers from essentially your committee, Darren, which had already gone through the committee, and we were reworking a second time. So we need to rethink a wee bit about how because financial risk, particularly in its form of affordability, is a natural area for the risk committee to be looking at. So to some extent, we need to think out how we carry out some of these, Michael, which is then what reflects ultimately in our work program. Look, the other thing then, Michael, I'm going to get this right, Michael Morris, when we come back with that Deloitte report, and probably that's a bigger piece around the work that the committee does, Under number 6, I would be keen for the committee, and particularly the new members, to receive our survey from, I think, the September meeting, because that is the baseline of what people are feeling about this committee, including the free flow checks. And I think we should have that in mind, and it should be made available to the new members just so that they can be aware of the committee they've walked into.
Mr. Chair, that can be
Brilliant.
done.
Okay. So I think in the interim we can receive these as a working document and relevant for the committee, noting the addition at the front end of just the committee composition and the point that Ross made, I think, is what I'm hearing at this stage. So the recommendations are that we receive the report and that we recommend to council that the terms of reference be incorporated in the governance statement. I don't think we're really having amendments at this stage, do we? It's really just you're going to add, that'll be on to be part of the governance statement. It's hardly an amendment. So we recommend to council these be adopted as the terms of reference. I'll move that from the chair to have a seconder. Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael. So we're into the program.
Kia ora, councillors and committee members. Thank you for the report that's before you. It is based on the work plan of, if you see in the attachment, the work plan of the previous committee. What we've tried to demonstrate in relation to the different reports is that we've taken the advice and recommendation on streamlining, and also with the introduction of another committee, reallocated the work according to the different duties and requirements of each of those committees. So that's primarily the reason for the second page in relation to the work plan. You'll see there's on the page 11 of board books, you have council reports and finance and project work plan. Those two are split out from the previous risk and assurance reports that were going up. So they have now been reallocated to those different committees and council. The risk and assurance committee work plan, which is on page 10 of your board books, has also been streamlined in relation to consolidation of some of the reports that we had split out into different individual ones. So the likes of one that was mentioned before in relation to health and safety, we previously had health and safety, cyber and financial risks all as three separate different reports. And when I say finance, it was the technology associated to it. Those have all been combined into one risk management report. So it will be one of the meaty reports in relation to the program, but that is where predominantly they have been combined into. From a finance risk report, it's important to note we've streamlined that in relation to all things relating to finance going forward, linked into that report. No longer giving the quarterly report, we're focusing on the risks associated to finance in that report. So that will have things like procurement, sensitive expenditure, related parties, etc. The main aim of this, and we're taking on the feedback going through the last training that there were too many reports, the main aim of this is to try and streamline the work going through, also for my team to have a very direct message about what to focus on in those reports coming forward. You'll see, though, for the first period, our December 1, we've already got a challenge there where we're going to have to shift our annual report one from December through until a new meeting which will need to be decided in February, and that one will need to have a additional meeting to serve that, so we don't have that listed on the schedule. Leave it open to questions.
Thanks, that's very helpful, and explain the second page, which was left me confused given there was 12 meetings anticipated. I'm glad that's not us. Do we have comments for Michael on the program? Thank you for that explanation, very helpful. A couple of points from me, please. Is that? Oh, sorry, Nobby, was that you first?
Just in relation to what we were discussing in the previous paper. So, Michael, it seems as though the general finance reporting will go to the Finance and Project Committee. And so what I was suggesting there is a process that if something triggered the chair of that committee to say, hey, there's something not quite right here, that we need to have a risk and assurance lens over it, that's where they'd make the referral, as opposed to it routinely going for a double stamp before it gets to full council and gets another stamp again. So that's the mechanism, I guess, I was sort of alluding to before.
Equally, I think what Michael's outlining here is recognising that the way we tried to deal with finance risk previously was cumbersome.
Sure.
And so an attempt to streamline. So it's worth having a look at it this way. Thank you. Any other comments from folk? Just a couple of minor detail points from me, Michael. I would like to invite Holco to also join us on the September the 23rd meeting. My assumption is, it might be actually November 23, my assumption is that that's about the time we want to adopt our annual report, which includes the group accounts. So my argument would be normal for Holco to report on its audit process and core findings, and indeed it's also a chance just to update us on their risk profile. That meant Holco, was coming to us in May rather than March. That would be fine on from my perspective, but I do appreciate that's part of that there. Confirmation of the internal audit program, I would love it if that could be brought into May. I think just to get us onto the financial year cycle of July to June makes sense, in which case approving the internal audit program prior to the commencement of the year makes sense, even though July is a matter of days into the new year. I think it's just appropriate form. We haven't got problematic. We haven't got a tick for the recommendation to council that they adopt the annual report. Don't know which one you're talking about, but I think we should be ambitious and place one in there for November 23. We're back into the normal year, according to everybody in the sector, including the Office of the Auditor General. So we should be expecting to make a recommendation to council in November 2023 on the next year's annual report. I appreciate that you're actually having to try and schedule a meeting in February around our current one. That only means, and I think this is important, and I was looking for it, I might be missing it, we should expect in March the annual audit plan, arrangements letter, whatever we want to call it these days, from the auditor. They should be disclosing to us in March where they are going with the coming audit. Just want to get us back onto the proper cycle. If they're going to give an opinion in November 23 and March, I need to know where they're going. Okay, with that, I'm comfortable. Are there any other comments folk would like to make? Right, let's move to the recommendation, please, that we receive the report and we approve the work program. I'm not going to say as amended because those are just things to keep us going. Okay, do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. Thank you, Nobby. With the motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Right, health and safety, Peter. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Mayor Clark, councillors. Just like to make a couple of comments. You'll note in the report, I've noted the difficulty we're having in recruiting for our health and safety positions. So we currently have 2 positions that are vacant that make up our health and safety team, and we are having difficulty recruiting for those. Second comment will be, although I haven't included incidences near misses in this report, during the last 6 months, we have seen a notable increase in the number of incidences and near misses of aggression towards staff, whether this be in the building here in the CAB, an arborist in the suburbs trimming a tree, gardeners working in centre plots, the parking compliance team, animal control, but there is 2 or 3 incidences being reported weekly Not saying there's not more, but we're getting 2 or 3 reported weekly.
Thank you. No. Anything else you want to say, Peter?
That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, back questions for Peter at this stage. Firstly, Rangi, then Tom.
Thanks, Peter. Look, just on your opening page, it talks about health and safety terminology, and it talks about that near misses not actually noted by WorkSafe as a terminology.
Not in the glossary on their website, no.
It seems weird because just bringing up one incident, quite a serious one, was White Island, where a tour company was prosecuted for having people there in the morning completely missing the accident, but were prosecuted for what I'd see as a near miss. Now, if they don't have it in there, if they don't have a near miss sort of thing in their whole guidelines, then I'm a bit bemused by how a company could be prosecuted, you know, considering no one knew that was going to erupt at the time. So I was I was surprised that WorkSafe don't treat near misses actually formally. Yeah, it's very unusual.
I wonder whether, Rangi, just what we were going here, I think it's valuable to note that perhaps WorkSafe don't have that, but the reality of it is, I think I could say it's accepted practice, and I defer to other members in the room that have health and safety experience, that the concept of near misses is actually valuable in the practice of health and safety because of exactly the definition that you've got here from elsewhere, which is they are really important learning experiences.
I'm not knocking the yeah, it's great importance that we do recognise those, but it just really amuses me that WorkSafe, with all their sort of power that they will, don't actually formally seem to recognise it until later on when it suits them.
Yep. So we should be watching White Island with interest as it goes through, because it's quite highly presidential. Tom, you got a question?
It's perhaps a question to you, Chair, actually, rather than a question to Peter, but it's become normal practice, I think, for large employers to have, you know, a governance group that specifically looks at health and safety rather than as part of its audit and risk committee. I think it'd be true, I don't know about local government, but certainly in the private sector, virtually since the Health and Safety Work Act, virtually every board has got a health and safety committee. And I just wonder whether we will ever, as part of this committee, have time to properly consider health and safety, or whether it perhaps should be a subcommittee, whether a subcommittee should be established to look specifically at this issue.
Tom, will I take it you wanted to reopen the terms of reference then?
Sure.
Given your previous comment, I think that sounds like a cheap shot. I want to say I hear your point, and indeed agree that the question becomes, how does Invercargill City want to approach, from a governance perspective, health and safety? And I wonder if we should readdress that after we've had PX items.
Chair, I was suggesting that it would remain under audit and risk, but perhaps would be a subcommittee of audit and risk.
No, I hear that point.
Yeah.
No, I hear that point. Might I say, most local government, it is part of the full audit and risk committee, by the way, Tom, just out of interest. There are variations that I have observed around the country, but essentially it isn't the way it sits here. I think the question becomes, when do we need, and probably the case is not when, but how do we have appropriate focus? So I take on board your advice. Let's, as I say, come back to that potentially after we've had our PX discussions. Thank you, appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ross.
Through you, Chair Peter, you noted specific instances around aggression and staff. I just want to know if there are any other areas that we need to be aware of in terms of health and safety that might be risk areas or pinch points at the moment specifically, and I'm thinking, is there any increase around use of EAP and the stress around COVID and financial issues?
We use the raise EAP as our support for employees We have not seen a noticeable increase in the last 6 to 8 months. We are averaging 1 to 2 staff members contacting EAP a month though, for a variety of reasons. Majority of the cases are non-work related issues.
Yes, Nobby.
Just some clarification. Certainly most big organisations refer to a near miss as being a third party near miss. That tends to involve that. So a good example is you drive down the road and you're doing everything right, but somebody comes very close to you in a vehicle. Where the incidents seem to be more internal. That's the way most organisations look at it. So a good example of that is you internally, you have a situation that with hindsight potentially could have been dangerous, or somebody else from another work area intervenes into your work area. Tom raises an interesting point. We've got in the PE part of our committee meeting a report from Safe Plus. And I think if you look into that, it's quite critical, and I don't want to get into that at this stage, but it's quite critical of what's missing at the top end of our organisation, because health and safety is top down, not bottom up. You can do as much as you like at the bottom, but the message is not clear at the top, then it gets offside. So I don't know where we will get to today and what part of that we will discuss that report, because it needs to be discussed.
Thanks, then, Nobby. I think this paper, Peter, and I appreciate you being candid about what it is and what it isn't. I mean, this is not a paper to manage or govern health and safety risks on, because obviously, as you said, there isn't information there that actually you can manage on. It's more a state of the high level, and I take it, because I appreciate you're doing the hard yards and covering, in fact, for positions that we have been unable to fill.
Yes.
So my assumption is that we need to get those filled to get the proper impetus and input into shall we say, enhanced or better health and safety, which would include the nature of the reporting either to this committee or to a subcommittee.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. So I think we are, Nobby, at some level of risk here.
Oh,
merely based on this report.
Yeah, absolutely no doubting
that actually the ability for councillors to participate in the Section 44 duties is difficult. So I think we should just acknowledge that, and that's certainly not a crack either at Claire or at Peter, but just recognising the challenge of actually filling those vacancies. So it does raise for me the question: are we just vulnerable to the market in terms of filling those positions? It seems to me one of the pivotal things that is sitting behind all of this challenge. I wonder if somebody can provide a comment, or is it just the market? Yes, Nobby.
Two things. I had the fortune or misfortune of sitting in on the SIT graduations recently, and to my surprise, when we looked at both masters and degree level, which is significant levels of occupational health and safety, I think there were about 35 or 40 graduates out of that program. So now not all of them will be here for sure, but there may be some potential there to recruit. But going back to what Tom says, I think we can sit here and look at water under the bridge. That's not going to achieve anything. But going forward, we need to have a subcommittee that focuses on health and safety, even if we don't have dedicated health and safety people. And that, I guess, that subcommittee might be councillors that have some passion in this area, and some senior staff that need to be involved. And certainly, without the health and safety people, it needs to involve just about all of ELT, because we've got some issues to resolve, and they're not going. That reports to this committee, or diagnosing what the health report is, what we got from that independent provider, only gives us a steer forward. We've got to do something from here to overcome the issues that we've got.
Sorry, I've got Rangi and then Darren.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I think both Tom and Nobby have valid points there. For the last 12 years on council, we get emails saying, please meet at some particular work site for your necessary health and safety duties or whatever responsibilities. It's a request that some people go along to, not many people go along to, and to me that seems a very it doesn't seem quite the correct way of councillors being involved in health and safety when it's almost like your best effort to show up. If it was assigned to a subcommittee, it would give it far more dedicated responsibility and accountability. So I'm all in favour of it, because what I've seen over the last 12 years has been really just something I see as just trying to tick a box.
Darren?
Thanks, Chair. I guess conversely, on the other hand, the risk of having that subcommittee of people who are interested doesn't actually abdicate the responsibility that sits with other councillors. I mean, ultimately, everybody has a duty, and if some people aren't taking an interest, then that needs to be raised with them directly. I mean, ultimately, there can be a variety of reasons why site visits can't take place. I missed the last one because I had the spicy cough, and that was probably me managing a bit of risk around the other staff members and councillors. But I know, and Tom will be familiar from health and safety processes with EIL and PowerNet, that they were vigorous at a director level, which is the same as being a councillor. And it's not just a process of doing a site visit, but it's actually every time you're in the space, if you notice stuff, to ask questions, to engage with staff, to give them from our level down the indication that we actually take this seriously, and getting them to understand that there is a culture shift from how things were before the Act came in. So I guess my fear is that putting it down to a subcommittee is just signalling who's truly interested and who's not.
I think I'd like to probably just park the subcommittee at this stage. Okay, Tom, you've raised a really good point, and I don't think we should lose sight of that. I think, and I think also what I'm hearing is clearly as councillors, and I join you in this, a level of concern about the challenges that are objective that we are facing in terms of upscaling our response, and it's starting with the issue of good work by you, and I think I should mention probably Steve, I understand, have voluntarily picked up this on behalf of your colleagues, which is great, to deal with it, but we haven't quite got it on the footing that we collectively as management and as governance hope for, or actually plan for, or aim for. I should be more definite about that, which means actually this recruitment process is actually quite critical. And I mean, I don't think there's any comment clear that could be made on that other than actually you are where you are in terms of the market, right?
Mr. Chair, I think that I could make a comment insofar as, and I'm sorry to differ with you, but recruitment is, I don't wish to say impossible, but we've gone 2 rounds for a health and safety manager.
Yes.
And we've made an offer, we've been verbally accepted, and then the current employer has upped their rate. We've had another candidate and they've withdrawn when their existing employer has known and has upped their rate. Quite frankly, we're just moving the deck chairs in the south. We're not paying enough to attract, and it's not that we're not paying the market. It's that this level of job is, there are enough other good jobs elsewhere in the country, and the sector has, since I joined Palmerston North in 2002, the sector has talked about growing its own, but it didn't grow its own health and safety people. So finding somebody to lead, in fact, I'd go further and say finding somebody who meets our expectations in terms of culture and doesn't bring a regulatory enforcement approach but works to win the hearts and minds of our staff is challenging. And so I want to encourage you to move away from thinking about recruitment to thinking about how we identify the right person or people from within our existing complement who can learn the skills.
I think you did. I don't know if we are just differing, Claire. I actually think we're probably on the same line. I accept in the light of attempts to recruit, we may have
Yeah.
to think of different ways of doing
Yes.
it, which I think is your
Yeah.
very sage advice. And I don't want to get into
Yeah.
trying to control recruitment. I'm just trying to recognise
So-
at the moment we have got a skill deficiency,
Yeah.
which is affecting our overall view. Right? I think your hand was up first, Tom, and then I got Nobby.
Look, I think we acknowledging that we don't have it's difficult to get a specialist who can pull it all together. We should also acknowledge the fact that it's accountability of leadership actually to manage the health and safety within their own teams. It's not an accountability of a safety specialist, and we have the fact that we cannot get a safety specialist does not change the fact that we have got that obligation to look after our people well. And when we look at the report that we see later in these reports, we have a relatively immature safety management system. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, however it is done, whether it's done in the way that Dan's suggesting or done in the way that I'm suggesting, governance needs to be doing what governance normally does to try to accelerate processes to give it enough interest that we see the safety situation better than perhaps it is today, irrespective of recruitment, actually.
Nobby.
Yeah, totally agree with what Tom just said. Look, and we are slightly different to EIL, which Darren referred to, because the directors of EIL are accountable. Councillors are not accountable under health and safety. So the buck stops with Claire under the PCBU. And so, but it's remiss of us not to support Claire and the executive leadership team if we have people that are skilled enough. And I've certainly done 10 years of this work, and Tom's got a huge amount of experience as well. So we could easily sit in on a group like that to get that overarching stuff. The diagram that Michael's got that Peter's got on page 24 is actually right. If you've got to have that executive stuff top down, and so we can help with that. I mean, it's too easy just to sit back and say, well, the buck stops with Claire. And I mean, I can tell you from my experience over that 10-year period of investigating probably every fatal accident in Southland in that time, that if we had a fatality at work and we had the report that we've got later on in the agenda, sitting in front of a coroner, we would have nowhere to hide. And the immaturity is a nice way of putting it in the report, but we've got to do some work. We can't just have it coming back to committee. And Claire's quite right, and Tom's quite right. Obligations don't stop and start with having a recruited specialist. If we don't have one, we've still got to fill the gap and make things happen.
I agree, and I think we're all agreeing strongly about the
Yep.
position that we're actually in.
Yep.
I'd like to suggest that unless there is something new to raise, because we have other items as we keep alluding to later in our agenda, where we may want to revisit, are there steps as governance we want to take? Are there any new comments on this report at this stage? Yes, Nobby.
Just one final thing, and you might give some guidance on this. If there was a desire by elected members to go down the subcommittee line, is it our shot to call on that? Do we set it up? Or is that something that the Risk and Assurance Committee would set up?
Look, I think I'd probably take Claire's advice on that, but I think I think this is why I want to come. I asked, could we deal with this issue after we've dealt with the stuff in PX?
Okay.
Because we need, we have more information that is going to come out there.
Sure.
I actually think this is an agreement between ourselves and management, and particularly Claire, rather than necessarily a command or bottom up or top down.
Yep.
I think we're all agreeing that actually we are challenged by health and safety, and something needs to happen, and reasonably quickly.
I guess what I was alluding to, Bruce, was that one of the few roles that I do have is being able to set up committees. So if that's what it takes, then I'll get on and get that done.
I'm looking for consensus, but I take your point.
Yep.
Can we go to the recommendations, unless there's anything else people would like to raise, please? Which is that we receive the report and we approve. Oh, it's the wrong one. Gone back too far. My apologies. That we receive the report and we note the summary of work undertaken today. Which I'm sorry that we haven't focused on the appendices, but we've had a chance to look at those. So they sit there. Okay. Do I have a person prepared to move these motions? Thank you, Darren. Do I have a second? Thank you, Rangi. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Right, if we could then move, please, to the audit. Or rather, actually, I suppose more correctly, the annual report and the audit.
That isn't.
Pardon?
The annual report that isn't.
That isn't. Yes, that's right. In fairness to this process. So, Michael, Patricia, thank you for coming to the front. We're in your hands.
Thank you, Chair, Mayor Clark and committee members and councillors. Before you have two letters. That one is from our external auditors and the other is from myself in response to those auditors. What I think it highlights to you is you do not have an audit opinion before you today, and you are not likely to get one before Christmas. In fact, we have actually started our planning and work to try and target end of February as a date. So we have proactively worked with the auditors to change direction towards that path. What I want to do before handing over to Patricia will give you a bit more detail into the process of what's gone on within the audit, so you can get a bit more understanding of the, what's led to today's events. But also I want to give you a bit of a insight from my perspective on where the audit has changed over time in relation to this process, but also in last year as well. One of the changes that we've seen in relation to the audit process is the introduction of technology into their process, because they have resourcing challenges. That is widely known amongst the industry, but it has also caused another headache in relation to that. The introduction of the technology has made a change in the approach of the auditors with the staff, and I've noticed it very much in relation to this particular process with our staff, and I want to highlight that. I haven't really dealt to it within the letter, but I have dealt with the outcome of it within the letter. The primary outcome of it is we have had a change in the way communication is occurring within the audit process. We are finding that the auditors are not communicating with the staff directly, as happened when they were physically on site or when they had to deal with it in a manual way. The reason being is they have multiple resources potentially around Australasia. We did have people from Australia on this one, and their communication channel is straight through the technical portal. This is creating a headache in relation to what they deem a misstatement, because the misstatement in some of them are recorded as things where they've said this item still needs to be done, or there is a space here, or what some of the other primary examples that I've looked at is this work is still outstanding. They're all sort of things that you would have had a discussion with the auditor on a one-on-one basis, and that would not have ended up being a misstatement from that perspective. So you're seeing a higher volume from that perspective. Classic example of this is when we had the auditors on site, and I don't think I probably saw two of the auditors travel the building in that whole time. They spent their time actually still working through the same digital platform, even though they had located themselves in our building. To me, that is a big downside of having the technology, and something that I think, back to Audit NZ, they need to think about and work forward on. One of the highlights for me from the audit, well, actually I would reverse that and say lowlights, because I do see it as a major issue in relation to the audit, and a bit of the breakdown is the communication between myself and the audit director has not been at the highest of levels. The example would be, I think the Mayor has had more one-on-one communication with the audit director than I have had, and he's had one conversation. That should highlight how many I've had. The only audit one-on-one conversations I've had were pre-audit in relation to something not relating directly to the plan of the audit. Having stated that, we have had a number of governance meetings, and I know we have one of the independent members of the committee is going to give us an update in relation to those governance, so I won't dwell on that too much. But I have highlighted in the report one particular governance meeting, which was on the 24th of November, which I did ask a very pointed question, and that question was very direct, which is, was there anything that would give us cause to not meet the 20th of December, at which stage I was told nothing. And I think I've also highlighted that all the matters that were raised in the audit comments should have been known. It took 9 days to find out that that was not the case, and it was not relayed to the governance board or to myself. I heard second hand in relation to that from my operations team. That illustrates what I'm talking about with the technology and the communications breakdown, and I think they need to find a way through that. We are here to help and support, and we're here to work through that. We want the audits to be successful as much as probably they do, because I think they do have a resourcing challenge, as do we. I've illustrated in the report what resourcing challenges we have, and I won't go into that any further. What I will do now is hand over to Patricia, who will take you through some of the more finer detail. I think it is important. Normally I wouldn't go into the detail in a meeting like this, but I think given the context, some of the new committee members and councillors probably need to understand the process that local government audits have to go through to understand and appreciate the challenges that we've got in relation to this audit.
Thanks, Michael. To set the scene, the audit is not a short one. It's approximately 6 weeks of field work after year end, with a week, typically in June. I'd prefer March, but typically June. They are auditing more than financials. They will audit every word that is within that annual report document, but they spend a significant amount of time on auditing a performance against the levels of service. And this is all under the thing which the chair will understand, that the public sector audits are different from a private sector audit. They're very much focused on ensuring that there is credibility within the public sector, so that they are looking at things in a much different lens, which requires a lot more information and a lot more work. You also need to recall that the council does not have a choice on its auditor. The Office of the Auditor General appoints an auditor. We also do not have a choice of the cost. The cost is determined by the Office of the Auditor General. In relation to this year's audit, the fieldwork began on the 31st of October. There has been 13 auditors at last count, excluding the director, that have been rolling in and out between 1 and 3 weeks at a time. There has also been 2 managers and 1 assistant manager. That's actually twice the size of my finance team working on it, if not 3 times. So there is a large quantum of information. The information requests have been extensive. Initially they asked for 121 different information requests, which we had provided the bulk by the time they started. As of Monday, there's 248 information requests sitting on their online tool. 127 being added during the audit. Only 10 are still sitting with us to answer. And there's 29 of those that we're waiting for audit to consider. The resource plan for the audit was never fully shared with us. Operationally, I would get the resource for the next week on a Thursday afternoon and the focus areas that they would be looking at, including whether an auditor was rolling off the audit in the next week, so we could prioritise their queries over everyone else's to close out sections. So we lacked that big picture, which now means that it became very clear in the operational meeting, which they said they were unable to sign off at, that they hadn't actually started some sections at all yet. And that is still the case today. It also makes it incredibly difficult to upwards manage the audit, which is typical in both private and public sector audits, that the client will be doing some upwards management. So the resourcing issues Michael's already talked about, and it's well known, with the border closures have probably actually hampered it more. Now that the border's reopening, we are seeing some new staff coming into the Audit New Zealand, and we're working with those. We also are expecting that next year we will return to a 31 October signing date and CCOs at 30 September. So we will have to do things much sooner. The significant resourcing issue from my side was that they didn't necessarily put the right sections in the right order. Because we did a full revaluation this year of all our assets, that requires third-party input into the audit. Those weren't done up front, and there wasn't good communication with those third parties to say this is when we need to do the audit. And as a result, they've been impacted by both COVID and other work requirements that meant they haven't been able to return the information in the same level as what audit would like. There was a request of an external valuer to turn around questions in 24 hours. There is also an external valuer that has not had any questions raised of them yet, and that will happen in late January. What Michael said about the technology, I would call it email audit by email, rather than audit by phone call or even a quick, Zoom meeting. The misstatements, I will agree, are significant, but having been through the list multiple times, they do include the bits we're including. We will sign on the 20th of December. That's been raised as a misstatement because that still had to be confirmed. So they are small things, formatting, spelling mistakes that haven't been picked up by spell check, and those sorts of things. But probably the bigger delay is actually the technical issues that came through. There are two significant technical issues outstanding. One has now been they're coming up from out of the ICHL group. One has now been cleared, so we're working through that one with audit. So as at 31 December, the only outstanding audits will be ICC group and ICHL group. There's been the need for an external expert to provide a report in order to clear an issue. And that's what's taking the time and was the reason for the delay. However, we have been working proactively to try and speed that up, and hence why we've come to a mid to late February signing date, but clearing those points. But once we had the issues, not necessarily at the technical things, something will always come up during an audit. It's actually more in the day-to-day management of the audit that's been the real issue for us.
That's it?
That's it.
Thank you, Radio. Appreciate it. Sorry, I thought there was a concluding statement or something. Look, I wanted to invite Ross to just quickly note his perspective. At the time that we had the challenges with the prior audit, we agreed that we'd group up as a committee in support, and Ross and I have met monthly, generally with the auditors. So Ross, I'm interested in your perspective, please.
Thank you, Bruce. As you say, I don't want to relitigate any past issues for 2021, but given that it was a post-balance date issue then that we were dealing with, and some are now post-balance date issues again, that causes me some angst on its own. But we did put in place a process after the 2021 sign-off where Bruce and I met with the audit director to clearly spell out our expectations going forward and air any grievances we had in respect of that. So we stepped outside our governance role and we did meet monthly with both our finance team and the senior audit team. There were quite a number of occasions that I chaired that meeting when Bruce was not available. And the points we covered were to ensure that there was adequate resource on both sides, that we identified any pinch points, we noted any technical issues, we noted any group issues, and we noted timeliness. And I support Michael's response, given that on that 24th of November meeting, there were no major issues identified. The only proviso we had at that stage was if either team suffered sickness via COVID and we then knew we had an issue. That point was raised at the subsequent meeting when audit were giving their reasons for delay, and they expanded on that, and we did pull them in, or I did pull them into line, saying that their only reason they gave was that they couldn't deliver was if COVID affected their team. I note in terms of the audit that it should be well planned in advance. You plan any job well in advance and you allow extra hours in that plan, because no audit runs smoothly, especially for an organisation of this size, and I would suggest any other local authority. So yes, I also felt blindsided by the decision, and I was certainly disappointed in the way it was communicated. And as I said, it's pretty obvious that I believe the Audit New Zealand planning was inadequate. Now, I've worked in public practice as a partner all my career and over 27 years as a partner, and my clients' expectations need to be met. If I fail, maybe they give me another chance. But as you say, in our case, we don't have another provider that we are able to go to. Also note, in terms of audit and the technology, that is quite common, their process now, and I note our major clients and public companies that we act for, when the audit team come in, they do sit in the boardroom with their laptops, and that's all they do, and their interaction is, and also, I think that is a wider issue. The other, anecdotally, I understand that there are up to 20 local authorities that dates have been pushed out. I know I have had spoken to 2, and what we need to understand is either there are substantive issues that need addressed, or if it's just a timeliness and resource issue. I would suggest, in terms of local authorities and the dates and the pressure Audit New Zealand's under, that only a joint submission of the chief executives and mayors of the local authorities is going to affect any change and make us heard. I don't think Little Invercargill on its own is going to be able to do that. Perhaps I'll leave it there, Chair, and we can respond after councillors' questions.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. Appreciate your comments. Okay, so we have the issue. By the way, one group that isn't here is the auditors, and I want to reflect a small involvement that they rang me direct to explain the letter that was coming through that we have on our agenda paper. And it seemed at that stage that the stage had been set, that we weren't going to get an opinion on the 20th, and that indeed, in my view, and I'm prefacing here what I'm suggesting in terms of a resolution, we will need to, quite frankly, sit down with Audit New Zealand as an accountability exercise and thrash this out. We're not going to achieve that today. Actually, I think the critical thing is that I think for the first time, Patricia, we actually have a defined plan with key issues to get us to the actual date of somewhere in February 23, which is useful, and I'm appreciative that we should allow you folk to focus on that at this stage. So with those comments, are there any comments? Tom, Rangi, and then Darren.
Chair, we all know that audits, and particularly I think of, you know, anything associated with the Crown, because you have to look at much broader areas, are very iterative affairs. You know, I think the layman might imagine an auditor coming in and looking at your books, and you know, and of course we all know it's not like that. There's constant iteration, and there needs to be extremely good communication, and it seems to me clear that that has not occurred. I was quite shocked actually when I read a comment from Mr. Olsen, and it appeared in Stuff, so I'm not quite sure where they got it from, but if I can just read it, Olsen acknowledged 2021 was extraordinary because of an auditor shortage and they had to prioritise work. Unfortunately, council deadlines were at the end of the queue, he said. We're at the end of the queue. And I mean, that's got to be completely unacceptable. And I know that, you know, we are certainly not Robinson Crusoe and having problems with Audit New Zealand. And I know that other organisations, including, you know, government organisations, have moved away from Audit New Zealand because they simply do not have the resources to do the work. And I think that's acknowledged even in Mr. Olsen's comment. So I would certainly encourage, you know, the work that you've described, Chair, and perhaps with the Mayor, and looking at whether there is an alternative to Audit New Zealand that we could use, as other organisations have, because I think in their own words they say we are at the end of the queue. Well, that's completely unacceptable, because I don't think our legal obligations are any different than any other company.
This will cause us to breach our obligation to report by 31 December. So we are not meeting our legal responsibility.
Exactly. So I think, sorry, as governors, I think, you know, we simply cannot accept that. And I know that other organisations, including organisations that I've been a director of, have moved away from Audit New Zealand exactly for that reason.
Okay. Sorry, Mike, you want to make a comment on that?
Just in response to the statement from the auditor around being at the end of the queue, it's worth council reflecting on which same auditor and Derek presented to us in 2021 and explained that process, where the commercials are at the forefront in relation to a lot of the audits and meeting their deadlines. Then it goes down to a lot of the trusts and subsidiaries from that perspective. Then it moves on to, because they've got other deadlines that they need to meet, statutory deadlines as well. Then from when it gets to local government, it then moves to the larger councils, and note some of those larger councils have only just signed off this month and they should have been closer to September. So the pressure is then compounded. And then towards the end of that, they start, which they tell us they don't do, but they start coming down the country with the smaller councils, and you'll see a lot of the smaller councils further up the council are getting theirs signed off pre-Christmas. So they do have an approach of coming down slightly through the country. So that's where the comment is, we're at the end of the queue. It is literally the end of the audit queue in relation to the annual calendar from their perspective.
Well, it's at least an honest comment, but it's a very shocking one.
Rangi.
Look, after reading both the letters, and thanks for Michael's reply, the key part is that accumulation of matters and the 24th of November date. Now, at what stage do you say we're just beating our heads against a brick wall dealing with the people we're dealing with, and we jump on a plane and fly to Wellington and actually speak to someone at the top of the food chain? I've just had a look at the hierarchy of Audit New Zealand, and at what stage do you do that? If you've got a tradesperson working in your house and they do an absolute crap job and you're not happy, you ring the owner of the company. That's the way I've always done things myself. If you have a problem and you're not getting anywhere, what sort of responsibilities do the chief executives of Audit New Zealand have? I mean, are they accountable as well, or do they just get paid a lot?
Ruggie, I would suspect that in the end of this there will be communication with Audit New Zealand, and I would suggest to you that we will get good representation from the senior ranks of Audit New Zealand over the concerns that we have.
So that is a plan.
Yep.
Right.
Has to be.
No, that's
I want to
fine.
reflect. There is a level of accountability that has to happen over this, and it will occur once we've got the audit done. We've got to get the audit done.
Right. Okay.
And then
Not
we
until
will,
then.
and more or less concurrently or with that, we will have to have a discussion around the accountability and the service that has or has not been provided.
Right.
And I'm confident that will include more than the director.
Thank you.
Darren?
Thanks, Chair. It would be fair to say that there was a strangled groan of exasperation that I emitted when I read the not completely unexpected email telling us that it was unlikely to be signed off today. And that harks back to our experience last year. And I recall being cautioned about slighting the professionalism of an auditor. But my concern is around the process, and if I were honest, watching what's been going on with other councils, for us to be in this position is actually no great surprise. Nor, I think, is it actually our fault, as is quite contrary to Mr. Olsen's letter. I think the one thing that really stands out is the fact that there have been these regular meetings, and that within the space of less than a month, we go from there being no issues to here's 2 pages of them. And that's just not acceptable and questionable. There should be some traffic light system of issues being raised, and if there was a series of things that had already been identified that were considered to be works in progress, fine. If they should have been in amber, then they should have been, but they weren't, and we've gone straight to red. As frustrating as it is, I know that the resolution of it is also not straightforward. I note Ross's comments with interest around the change, I guess, in work habit across many sectors, not just audit and accounting, but there is a tendency now to communicate in a one-way manner rather than two-way instant communication, and let alone the benefit that you can get from the non-verbal communication of even a Zoom, rather than just banging off an email. An email should be the last resort. There's nothing like a phone call, and the best you can have is face-to-face, and we will look forward to that opportunity in the new year. But as a sector, and it seems to be our issue, that's the concern, and it's a sector-wide response, I think, that we need to signal with LGNZ, talk to our other local government partners from this region and go, how many of us are in this position? This is not our fault, really. We're the ones who get named in Parliament, bearing in mind that we've been under a DIA spotlight for the last couple of years. If there was something that we had done wrong, we would own it and rectify it. That's just what we do. But as a sector, we need to be going to the Minister and saying, this isn't acceptable. And there needs to be some change in the structure of the audit process, either with how the Office of the Auditor General deals with this, or how they're resourced, to how we can go out and source it. Are we able to go private to accredited auditors, bearing in mind that, as Patricia said, there are many more things than just financial that are being looked at. But I think it's a sector-wide approach to resolving the issues that's going to get us the best outcome. As far as we sit with this, it is what it is, and we've just got to ride it out, noting the impact that it has on staff, noting the impact that it had on staff last time, and the cost to us, not just financial, but we lost people, but also the effect that it has on our annual plan process, because we only have limited staff, and the work that they'd be doing for us on the annual plan is now going to be still tied up with completing this audit, and that's hugely frustrating as well. So I guess I understand, and I'm not surprised at the position that we're in, but I think the only way to get change, because otherwise this is just going to happen again next year, no matter what we put down on paper, is to have a sector-wide response. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Right, can we move to the Nobby?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure that going through LGNZ will help us. I think we just need to make a stand ourselves. So I'm quite happy, as Rangi suggested, to go and front somebody up with our range of issues. Look, I had a meeting with Derek directly, one-on-one in my office, around these dates, and I was very specific with him. I said to him, will we get to the 20th? Yep, no, it's all looking good. Any issues? No, it's all fine. I said, look, just be mindful. I will not sign after the 20th. I'm not going to repeat what happened last year. As Deputy Mayor, I raced into an office, I think on the 24th of December, and signed at 5 p.m. or 5 to 5, right before the deadline, and I didn't know what I was signing. Well, I knew what I was signing, but I didn't know what amendments had gone on in the preceding 2 or 3 days. And I said, I just wouldn't go down that track again. He said, oh, well, you know, you could end up reporting to and be reported in Parliament. I said, well, so be it. The issue's not at our end. So I just find this whole letter for home just a butt-covering exercise, and it needs to be challenged, and we can't tiptoe around the issue. As others have said, we'll just end up down the same path again next year. Look, we've bent over backwards. Look, we've got resourcing issues as well. But, you know, 1 manager, 2 assistant managers, and 13 auditors over an audit period is not good. And everything by technology as opposed to face-to-face, as Darren said, it is not good either. He didn't alert us to anything in that meeting I had. I'm sure it's around about the 7th, but I will check the date. He specifically came in to see me, not the other way around. Yeah, I think it's just a farce. So using your wider hat, I understand that Gore and SDC have Deloitte. Are they getting through the process and signed off? So is this a sector-wide issue, or is this an audit in New Zealand?
Environment Southland have been signed off by Deloitte. Southland District will not, because of the resourcing challenges, and the Auditor General asked Southland District to change auditor in October to Deloitte, but because of their resourcing situation, that won't be signed off until next year.
So are they currently Deloitte?
They have moved to Deloitte, yes.
I mean, what I'm trying to sift out, is this an audit New Zealand issue, or is it, because I've heard feedback as well that the resourcing issue is right across the sector.
Look, generally, Nobby, I'm conscious, as I said, I would like Audit New Zealand to stand on their own 2 feet in front of us and talk to their issues. I think that's only fair in the final analysis. I think it's good that through this public meeting they are aware that we are very unhappy, and they will describe their resourcing challenges. But I do want to say that yes, I have had enough messages given directly in the sector, heard and being party to, where the resourcing challenges across all auditors has been challenging, but particularly focused around Audit New Zealand. I wonder if we just move to the resolutions, please, because I think we've had a reasonable crack. And I just wonder if these amended resolutions, which are prepared yesterday, would satisfy us as a means of going forward. So firstly, we received the report, that we note the letter from Audit New Zealand and management's response. The last phrase is what I've added, and the rest is what I've added. That we record our disappointment. Planned completion of the external audit reporting commitments cannot be met by the statutory reporting deadline of 31 December 2022. I think it's important we recognise that this will constitute a statutory breach. The committee notes that management is expediting completion of the annual report and receipt of the audit opinion by the end of February 2023. I think that's what we're working to, and that's the deadline. The committee asked the independent chair and member, that's Ross and I, to respond to Audit New Zealand, and by the way, that should be the OAG, not the Assembly of God, with the committee's concerns regarding the letter and management's response, and that the council notes that the committee will meet with Audit New Zealand to discuss the issues outlined in their letter including management's response, and will report back to council by March 2023.
Through you, Chair, may I ask a question to you?
Sorry,
But yeah, I think you.
Tom, just wait a second. I'm just getting some advice from Claire. Yep. Ah, okay.
And that's talking about it doesn't reference it after the end.
Okay. Fair enough. And I was wondering whether we would try and deal with everything in one go.
That's fine.
That we would receive.
Yep.
It. Can I? I did actually, by the way, and just Claire's asked me about my intention of number 6. I mean, I think, quite frankly, the way this will work out, there will be a need for Ross and I, and probably you, Nobby, and I dare say there's some of management, Claire and Michael and Patricia, to meet directly with Audit New Zealand to discuss this. Okay. But I also think that actually the committee should also meet with the audit director. We have to. But and when that's going to happen, probably roughly the same time we get the opinion, because Derek's going to be here.
So could you choose number 6 to say meet the audit director?
Okay, so we're going to say that you want me to keep it as the committee, or do you want to representatives of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I've understood you to say that Mr. Olsen will attend this committee in February or March, and I wonder if number 6 would be better, reading that council notes the committee will meet with the audit director to discuss the issues outlined in his letter, and we'll report back to council. And then that then reflects that you're asking him to. Otherwise, I think it's wide open to interpretation as to whether the whole committee is going to meet with Audit New Zealand.
Okay, fair enough. We'll deal with that way. Tom's had his hand up first, but are you wanting to comment on number 6, are you, Nobby, in terms of its form?
Well, no, I just want to clarify 2 things. I don't know why we're negotiating with Derek going forward. I mean, I don't trust the guy. For him to throw this letter and throw it into that available to the media as well, it discredits us. He gave finance assurance, he gave me assurance, he's been talking to you. Yeah, it's all been done, and then it doesn't happen. And we sit back here and say, oh, well, it'll be done in February. Well, will it be done in February? And that's the next issue. Okay. So I've got zero tolerance for this going forward. So, I mean, I've got to make some decisions about where I take this, because, I mean, you just can't sit here talking to Derek anymore. Right. I mean, why isn't the guy zooming in today?
Because.
Sorry, he's not zooming in today because I didn't invite him.
Oh, okay.
And that's a combination of actually there was limited point.
Sure.
Because we need to actually sit down properly, face to face, and literally he, for good reasons, family reasons in South Africa.
Yeah, but look, sorry for going on about this, but I just need to flesh it out. Look, we sat with him this time last year. Yeah. And had this same conversation about his resourcing and his time framing, and us being north to south and being the last cab off the rank when it comes to getting audits done. It's not good enough. And you just don't keep telling the same person it's not good enough.
Okay, can I, Nobby, I think we're just repeating what we've already agreed in the conversation. The question is, have I got a motion here that is going to be satisfactorily meet the intent of the committee? Tom, you had a point.
Sorry, and maybe it just strengthens a little bit the purpose of that meeting. I mean, I think that we should be actively exploring whether we can follow the example of other councils here in this region and move away from Audit New Zealand. I mean, I have been on, I've got to tell you, a few boards now who've had this exact conversation. It's always been a difficult process, but they've always managed to achieve it and move away from Audit New Zealand and move to a private provider, for the simple reason that Audit New Zealand simply cannot provide the service. And the very statement that we are last in the queue, I think, is almost proof enough as far as I'm concerned. Now, while we can go and you can go and you can, discuss with Audit New Zealand, I would like to see part of that discussion, even at this stage. What would be the process by which we could move to a private provider? I'm not proposing that we do. What would be the process by which?
Please, the Auditor General will always be the auditor of the Invercargill City Council. The Controller and Auditor General is our auditor. He or she appoints a representative to undertake the audit. In this case, they have appointed Audit New Zealand. So technically what we would be asking would be for the Auditor General to consider appointing a different audit provider. And that's what's been achieved elsewhere if there have been changes in any provider, whether that's away from Audit New Zealand or whether that's bringing Audit New Zealand in over another provider. So that's just technically the correct way to deal with it. I think the important point here is under number 5, we are wanting to talk to the Office of the Auditor General as well as Audit New Zealand. So this goes back to the point, who do we want to talk to? And it goes back to your point, Ringy, we want to talk to the owner. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do here, is engage with both Audit New Zealand and the Office of the Auditor General on actually our concerns. And it's going to have to follow 2 things. One, I suspect we need to have that time to sit down with the 2 audit directors, Chris Janae, who does City Holdings, along with Derek Olsen, who does ICC, and we need to meet over these 2 letters. But then I suspect out of that there will need to be a discussion in the way that you're already indicating with me with the OAG. Okay, so that is going to be important. Claire has quite rightly said, Nobby, you should also co-sign number 5. Okay, so it's just not me and Ross, it's you as well.
I think Tom raises an important issue that in 5 we should also have written into that we want to discuss with the Auditor General the issue of who provides our audits.
Right.
I think some have suggested we should have a bit more of a team. Look, putting the finance people beside me here and with Derek's not going to achieve anything. It'll just be a slanging match.
So if we were to add to that that the Mayor, Independent Chair and Member respond to the Audit New Zealand OAG with the committee's concerns regarding the letter and management's response and future audit. Future providers. Audit. And no, I'm trying to. You said it best right at the start. And who should provide the audit going forward?
Sure. Future audit provisions.
Sorry, future audit provision. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's better.
Right, I think we've got a reasonably fashioned. Is there any other comments here folk would like to raise on the? Thank you for your help, Claire, on these resolutions.
Just the last one, Bruce, which is that when you say audit director, you're talking about Derek.
Yes.
I don't see any value. I think we passed that point.
I think I'm back. I think I'm back now. I think I'm back to my point. That in fairness to Derek, he has fired his shots. We've got that letter. We've got a response from Derek. We need to sit down around a table and discuss and thrash that out. I mean, there are challenges that he is saying about us, which we need to think through, albeit that in the weight, the balance, certainly of the conversation today, we believe we're on pretty solid ground relative to what Derek has said, but we need to have that thrashed out. Yes.
I guess what I'm suggesting is, look, we're already committed to February, March. Any discussion we have with him between now and then, we'll just go back over the same stuff. It's not going to change next year's audit, which is what we really want, is we want to get this one completed and have a better process next time around for our staff. Time these guys up in the next couple of months with a session with Derek, I think achieves little enough. Yep. I mean, you've been meeting with him monthly, and this letter came as a surprise to you. It came as a surprise.
It came as a blindside.
I'm bloody annoyed.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just remind the committee that Derek will need to attend for the signing of the annual or the presentation of the annual report, and I would fully expect that somebody around the table will raise these issues with him. So I think that all you're doing with this resolution is signalling to everyone, including Derek, that there may be that discussion.
Yes, Ross.
In terms of process, point 6 will precede point 5.
I think it does. I think that's a very helpful comment. If we were to change that round, that gets the order. That gets the order right. Thank you, Ross. It's a good point. Right. I'm prepared to move this from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Ross. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's not, I'd like to put it then, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, we need just about 5 minutes
Yep.
to
Yep.
the Zoom link.
Yes, okay, so look, could I just move the procedural motion that we go into PX for the reasons that are stated, and then I propose we take a short break. When we come back, we'll be already in PX. So if we go to, sorry, just got to find it, page 3, you realise the two matters are in front of here. I'll move from the chair that we move into PX. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Okay, let's adjourn for 5 minutes while the appropriate